Since Boris Johnson became Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, the British pound has continued to drop rather significantly versus both the US dollar and the euro. Now, what's driving this is a change in probabilities with respect to what people think is going to happen with Brexit. And the way in which we can tell these probabilities are changing is by looking at markets, in particular by looking at the odds makers. If you look at Ladbrokes and Paddy Power, for example, according to their markets, the likelihood of a no-deal Brexit has increased from around 27% in the middle of July up to over 40% by the middle of August. And all of that seems to have taken the British pound down by about 5% versus the US dollar. Now, extrapolation is always a dangerous activity at any profession, and that's also true in the financial markets. But given that we don't have much other data to rely on, what this does help us to do is perhaps extrapolate what might happen in the event of a no-deal Brexit, where the, say, 40-some% chance of a no-deal Brexit suddenly becomes a 100% chance of a no-deal Brexit between now and the end of October. If the pound fell by about 5% as the probability rose from 27% to over 40%, one might extrapolate a more significant fall in the pound, perhaps more than 10 or 15%, should a no-deal Brexit actually materialize in reality. And what that would mean for the markets is it would no longer be retesting the 2016 low in the pound versus the dollar, but rather perhaps the 1985 or the all-time low in the exchange rate when the pound fell below 1.05 versus the US dollar. Now, of course, there are possibilities abound. We of course don't know what's going to happen with Brexit. No-deal Brexit is only one of many possibilities. The likelihood of leaving with a deal has actually increased slightly from about 16 to 20%. And in addition to that, when it comes back in session in early September, there are groups within Parliament who will try very, very hard to block a no-deal Brexit, perhaps creating a no-confidence vote, perhaps calling for new elections, which in turn might produce a second referendum or at least an extension on EU membership for the United Kingdom. And if that happens, the British pound could soar to much higher levels. What's particularly strange in all of this, though, is that the British pound options versus the US dollar and versus the euro don't show a particularly high degree of stress. The implied volatility has increased a little bit, but may not fully be reflecting the degree of risk in the system if Britain goes to one extreme, leaving the EU without a deal, or to the other extreme, remaining in past the October 31st deadline. I'm Eric Norland, Senior Economist with the CME Group in London.